My brother-in-law, Gavin, his voice booming across the patio. Jasper aced his exams, top of his class again. And as his wife, my sister-in-law, Serafina, practically glowed. A small, cold knot tightened in my stomach. I smiled, of course, offered my congratulations. But even then, before I knew anything, really knew anything, a tiny, insistent voice whispered that something was off. And oh, how right that little voice would turn out to be. You know how family gatherings can be right. That mix of genuine affection, simmering old rivalries, and the unspoken pressure to present your best self, your best life. Our family, the Vances, were masters of this intricate dance. My in-laws, Arthur and Eleanor, were the anchors, kind, traditional, proud of their two sons, Gavin and my husband, Liam. Gavin, the older one, was all ambition and bluster, married to Serafina, who was, well, Serafina. And then there was us, Liam, my rock, my calm in every storm, our bright, inquisitive daughter, Willow, and me, Ilara, or Lara, as everyone called me. I was a teacher passionate about literature, about opening young minds. It was a life I loved, a life I thought was pretty transparent. It usually started as these things often do, subtly. One Sunday dinner at Arthur and Eleanor's, the scent of roast chicken and rosemary filling the air, that comforting hum of family. Arthur raised his glass, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "To Laura," he said, his voice warm. "We heard about your new role, leading the curriculum development, and Eleanor and I were just saying how proud we are of the work you do, not just in the classroom, but for the whole community." My cheeks warmed. "Oh, Arthur, thank you. It's a challenge, but I'm really enjoying it." Liam squeezed my hand under the table, his smile genuine. Across from us, I saw Serafina conjure a smile. It was quick, a little too bright, and then she shot this fleeting, almost imperceptible glance at Gavin. I caught it, cataloged it as odd, but then Eleanor was asking about Willow's latest art project, and the moment passed, or so I thought. These little things you see, they're like breadcrumbs. You only realize they're leading you somewhere sinister when you're already deep in the woods. A few weeks later, there was a big family potluck. I decided to make my famous New England clam chowder. It's my grandmother's recipe, rich and creamy, usually a crowd pleaser. I'd prepped it at home and brought it over to Arthur and Eleanor's, planning to just heat it up. Serafina was already in the kitchen when I arrived, bustling about, a picture of domestic efficiency. "Oh, Lara, let me help you with that," she chirped a little too enthusiastically. "I can just check the seasoning for you while you get settled." I was grateful, a little flustered from carrying the heavy pot and Willow's bag of toys. "Thanks, Sarah, that's sweet of you." I left her to it, joining the chatter in the living room. Looking back, the image of her alone in that kitchen, her back to the door, a small, secretive smile playing on her lips as she helped, sends a shiver down my spine. She must have seen her chance. A generous pinch of this, an extra dash of that. Only it wasn't just a pinch, was it? When it was time to eat, I proudly ladled out my chowder. The first spoonfuls were met with interesting reactions. My father-in-law, Arthur, took a tentative taste and his eyes widened, followed by a series of suppressed coughs. Eleanor, ever the diplomat, managed a small sip and then delicately dabbed her lips. "It's got a bit of a kick tonight, dear," she said, her voice gentle. Others were less subtle. My nephew, Jasper, Serafina's son, took one mouthful, and his face contorted, grabbing for his water glass. My heart sank. I grabbed a spoon, my cheeks burning. One taste, and I knew. It was an inferno of cayenne pepper, a dead sea of salt. It was inedible. Mortified, I stammered apologies. "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I don't know what happened. I felt like sinking through the floor. How could I have messed it up so badly? My signature dish." Serafina, bless her cotton socks, was right there with a comforting arm. "Oh, Lara, don't you worry your pretty little head about it," she cooed, though I thought I saw a flicker of something triumphant in her eyes. "It happens to the best of us. More for the casserole, everyone." She steered the conversation away, the perfect supportive sister-in-law. Inside, I'm sure she was doing a victory dance. Later, as Liam and I were packing up to leave, Eleanor pulled me aside in the hallway. She placed a kind hand on my arm. "Don't worry about the soup, dear," she said softly, her eyes full of genuine sympathy. "Everyone has an off day in the kitchen. It doesn't matter one bit." Her warmth was like a balm to my frayed nerves. But as I hugged her goodbye, I didn't see Serafina lurking just out of sight in the shadows of the dining room archway. I didn't see her face darken at Eleanor's gentle words to me, didn't hear her mutter under her breath, so low that only the stillness of the house could catch it. Of course, she always gets away with everything. Liam and I walked out hand in hand, Willow chattering sleepily between us. If I had turned back, I would have seen Serafina watching us from the window. The manufactured sweetness melted from her face, replaced by a gaze that was cold, calculating, and deeply, unnervingly unsettling. But I didn't. I was still just Laura, the unsuspecting teacher, walking into a storm I couldn't yet see. The next few months were a slow, insidious drip feed of, well, I didn't have a name for it then. Just a growing sense of unease, a feeling that the ground beneath our perfect family picture was subtly shifting. The focus, as it often does in families, turned to the children. Report card season arrived. Another family dinner, another performance. Willow, my bright spark, came home with a glowing report card, all A's, enthusiastic comments from her teachers. She was so proud, practically bouncing as she showed it to her grandparents. Arthur and Eleanor lavished her with praise, genuine and heartfelt. "That's our brilliant granddaughter," Arthur boomed. Then it was Jasper's turn. He was a couple of years older than Willow, a good kid, but school didn't come as easily to him. Serafina presented his report card with a flourish that felt a little forced. B's and C's. "Well," she began, a defensive edge to her voice. "Jasper has a very different learning style, you know, and his teachers are notoriously tough. It's not really a fair comparison, is it?" She patted Jasper's head, but her eyes darted towards me, a challenge in them. I just smiled and said, "He's doing great, Sarah. Every child learns at their own pace." But the air was thick with unspoken things. School events became another stage for this quiet drama. The start-of-year parent-teacher conferences. I was there, of course, not just as Willow's mom, but as a teacher in the same district. I knew many of the parents, the faculty. I felt comfortable engaged, asking questions, sharing insights. I remember giving a short presentation about new literacy initiatives. As I spoke, I noticed Serafina at the back of the room. She wasn't there for my presentation. Her son was in a different grade level with a different schedule. She just lingered, watching me. Her expression was hard to read, a mixture of something like scrutiny and, was it resentment? It was unnerving. She slipped out before I could say hello. The pressure on Jasper was mounting, and you could see it in his eyes. I'd sometimes see Serafina at her kitchen table, ostensibly helping him with his history homework. From across our adjoining backyards, I could hear her voice rising in frustration. "Jasper, focus. Why can't you just get this? Look at Willow. She just buckles down and does it. It's not that hard." Poor Jasper would just shrink his shoulders, slump the textbook, a symbol of his perceived failure. My heart ached for him. He was just a kid trying his best under a mountain of his mother's expectations. One afternoon, I was helping Willow build a diorama for her social studies project. It was an intricate little scene of a Native American village, and we were laughing, covered in glue and paint, completely absorbed. The sun was slanting through our kitchen window, a perfect autumn day. I happened to glance up and saw Serafina standing at her own kitchen window watching us. There was no pretense this time, no forced smile, just a raw, simmering anger in her eyes that made my breath catch. It was a look of pure, unadulterated envy. She turned away sharply back towards her laptop, her face set in a look of grim, almost desperate determination. If I'd known what she was typing into that search bar, the chill I felt then would have turned into a full-blown Arctic freeze. School district network vulnerabilities. How to bypass teacher login security. Accessing confidential school files. The thought even now makes my stomach clench. My success. Willow's success, the simple, uncomplicated happiness of our little family unit. It was all fuel for her fire, and she was about to pour gasoline on it. The midterm exams were approaching. As a teacher, it's a stressful time. preparing the papers, ensuring fairness, then the mountain of grading. I was working late in my classroom one evening finalizing the American literature midterm. It was a good exam, I thought, challenging but fair with some unique essay prompts I'd crafted to really make the students think. I saved the file meticulously, once on my desktop, then again on the school's secure network drive. Just as I was about to log off, my phone buzzed. A student, bless her heart, having a mini meltdown over a pending assignment. "Mrs. Vance, I just don't understand the prompt for the Hawthorne essay." I sighed, but of course I told her I'd call her back in a few minutes. I gathered my things, intending to make the call from the staff lounge, where the coffee was still marginally fresh. This is where Serafina's insidious planning clicked into place. She knew I often stayed late. She also knew, probably from some casual comment or her volunteer work at a school gym event, that the side door near the gymnasium was sometimes propped open by the evening janitorial staff for convenience. She'd probably forgotten something in the gym, a water bottle, a scarf, anything to give her an excuse to be in the building after hours. She slipped into my empty classroom like a ghost. I can picture her now, heart-pounding eyes darting around, a mixture of fear and twisted resolve on her face. My computer was still unlocked, but she'd been observant. Maybe she'd seen me type my password once or twice, a common phrase, a pet's name, something easily guessed by someone who paid close enough attention. Or perhaps she'd cleverly shoulder-surfed it during a less guarded moment at a family gathering where I'd quickly checked an email. The method doesn't even matter as much as the intent. She got in. A few clicks, and there it was. Midterm, AMLIT, Vance Final. DocX. Her fingers must have trembled as she inserted a sleek, anonymous USB drive into the port. Copy, paste. And then the chillingly methodical part, she opened the recent documents list and carefully deleted the exam file from the history. No trace. Quick, efficient, and utterly violating. Back in her own home, the stolen exam glowing on her screen, she meticulously crafted a study guide for Jasper. Not a guide, really. It was the exam question by question with my answers typed out. She drilled him day after day. "This is important, Jasper. You need to get a high score. You will get a high score." The pressure on that poor boy must have been immense. He looked increasingly pale and stressed in the days leading up to the midterms, but what could he do? He was trapped. Test day. Jasper, a bundle of nerves, sat down and wrote. The answers flowed almost too perfectly. His teacher, a kind man named Mr. Harrison, was surprised, then pleased. Jasper, who usually struggled to articulate his thoughts in essays, was suddenly producing insightful, well-structured responses, a remarkable, almost miraculous improvement. The following Sunday, another family gathering, the air was practically vibrating with Gavin's pride. "You won't believe this," he announced, his voice loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Jasper absolutely nailed his American Lit midterm. Nearly a perfect score, 98%. Arthur and Eleanor were ecstatic. "That's wonderful, son. See, Sarah, all that hard work paid off." Serafina was radiant. This was her moment, her son vindicated. She was vindicated. She positively beamed, soaking in the praise. I congratulated Jasper, of course. "That's amazing, Jasper. You must have studied so hard." I was genuinely happy for him, though a tiny nagging voice in the back of my mind whispered that his sudden leap in performance was extraordinary. Too extraordinary. No, I dismissed it. I was being cynical. He'd worked hard, his mom had helped him. That was all. Serafina, in her moment of triumph, threw an arm around my shoulders, a gesture that felt more possessive than affectionate. "See, Lara," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "My Jasper is a brilliant boy, too. He just needed the right motivation." She squeezed me tightly. I smiled back, but that little flicker of unease, that almost imperceptible prickle on my skin, returned. Something somewhere was profoundly wrong. I just didn't know what it was. Not yet. The universe, or maybe just Willow's innocent curiosity, has a funny way of bringing secrets into the light. It happened, as these things often do, at another one of those quintessential Vance family dinners. Everyone was still buzzing about Jasper's remarkable achievement. He was quiet, though, picking at his food, not quite meeting anyone's eye. Willow, ever my little artist, was sitting on the floor near the fireplace, a sketch pad and a tin of colored pencils her constant companions. She was happily doodling, humming to herself, seemingly oblivious to the adult conversation. After a while, she wandered over to her grandpa Arthur. "Grandpa," she said, holding up a small, neatly folded piece of paper. "Jasper dropped this out of his history book when he was showing me his drawings. It looks like his notes." Her voice was pure innocent, completely unaware of the grenade she was about to roll into the room. Arthur took the paper, a fond smile on his face. "Well, let's see what our scholar has been up to." He unfolded it, his brow furrowing slightly in confusion. I was sitting close by, chatting with Eleanor, and I glanced over. Just a casual glance. And then my blood ran cold. My breath hitched. I knew that handwriting. It was Seraphina's neat, slightly slanted script. But it wasn't just the handwriting. It was the words, phrases, specific terminology, unique essay prompts I had designed for my American literature midterm. My mind raced, piecing together the impossible. The overly spicy soup, Seraphina's strange intensity, Jasper's sudden, miraculous improvement, the way she'd looked at me, that glint of something. It was all there on that flimsy piece of paper, a Rosetta Stone to her deception. My voice, when I finally found it, was quiet, dangerously calm. "Willow, honey, where did you say you found this?" "In Jasper's history textbook, Mommy. It just fell out." She looked from me to Arthur, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere. I turned my gaze to Seraphina, then to Jasper. The cheerful chatter around the table had died down. All eyes were on us. "Seraphina," I began, my voice still low but firm, each word carefully chosen. "Jasper, what is this?" Seraphina's smile faltered. She tried for a breezy laugh, but it caught in her throat. "Oh, it's nothing, Lara. Just some review points I jotted down for him. You know how it is trying to help them study." She shot a warning look at Willow. "Willow, sweetie, you really shouldn't go through other people's things." Her eyes darted nervously between me, Arthur, and her husband, Gavin. Jasper, poor Jasper, looked like he was about to be sick. His face was pale, his lower lip trembling. He avoided everyone's gaze, staring intently at his plate. I pressed on gently but relentlessly. "Jasper," I said, my eyes fixed on him, not unkindly, but with an unyielding demand for the truth. "These notes, they look exactly like the answer key for the midterm exam I prepared. The one you scored so highly on." A heavy silence descended on the room. You could have heard a pin drop. Gavin looked utterly bewildered, glancing from me to Seraphina to his son. Arthur and Eleanor exchanged worried looks, their earlier joy extinguished, replaced by a dawning apprehension. The pressure was too much. Under the weight of my steady gaze, the suffocating silence, and his own crushing guilt, Jasper finally broke. His voice was a barely audible whisper, laced with misery. Mom made it for me." Seraphina shot him a look of pure fury, then turned her glare on me, her face a mask of outrage and desperate denial. "He doesn't know what he's saying. He's just overwhelmed by all this attention. It's ridiculous." But it was too late. The first crack in her carefully constructed facade had appeared, and it was about to shatter completely. My quiet, unassuming life was on the verge of an earthquake, and I, Lara Vance, the trusting teacher, was standing right at the epicenter. The fight for truth, for my own integrity, had just begun. The dining room moments before, filled with laughter and pride, was now a courtroom. Jasper's whispered confession hung in the air, heavy and damning. Seraphina was still sputtering denials, her voice rising in pitch, but the conviction was gone, replaced by a frantic, cornered energy. It was Arthur who spoke first, his voice grave, stripped of its usual joviality. "Jasper, son, look at me. Tell us exactly what happened." And Jasper did. The words tumbled out, interspersed with tears and choked sobs. He told them everything. How his mother had come home with the test paper days before the exam. How she'd made him memorize the answers, drilling him relentlessly, telling him this was his chance to prove he was as smart as Willow, to make his father proud, to make her proud. He talked about the immense pressure, the fear of disappointing everyone, the guilt that had been eating him alive. He looked so small, so broken. My heart ached for him, even as a cold anger toward Serafina began to solidify within me. Gavin listened, his face transforming from confusion to dawning horror then, to a quiet, seething rage directed squarely at his wife. He didn't say a word, just stared at Serafina, and the weight of his silent condemnation seemed to crush her more than any shouted accusation could have. Eleanor had tears in her eyes, her hand resting on Arthur's arm as if for support. They looked utterly poleaxed, their disappointment in Serafina a palpable thing in the room. This wasn't just about a stolen test, it was about a profound betrayal of trust, a corruption of family values. The next day was one of the hardest of my professional life. I made an appointment with Mr. Henderson, the school principal. With Liam by my side for moral support, I laid it all out, the folded piece of paper which I'd calmly retrieved from Arthur Jasper's tearful confession, the whole sorry mess. It was agonizing. I was in essence accusing my own sister-in-law of a serious breach of ethics and implicating my nephew. But I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that it was the right thing to do. For academic integrity, yes, but more importantly for Jasper. He needed to learn that actions have consequences, that there are no shortcuts to genuine achievement, and frankly for myself, my professional reputation, my very identity as an educator was on the line. Mr. Henderson listened patiently, his expression growing more serious with each detail. He examined the notes, his lips tightening. When I finished, he looked at me with a deep respect that helped to soothe some of the turmoil inside me. "Lara," he said, his voice kind but firm, "this must have been incredibly difficult for you. I commend your integrity. You did the right thing for everyone involved." The school handled it discreetly but firmly. Jasper's midterm grade was nullified. He was suspended from the academic decathlon team he'd recently, and perhaps not coincidentally, made. He was also required to attend counseling sessions with the school guidance counselor, focusing on ethics and healthy coping mechanisms for academic pressure. For Serafina, well, there were no official school repercussions for her, but the consequences within the family were immediate and severe. She wasn't publicly shamed, not in the way she might have feared. The Vances weren't like that. But the withdrawal of warmth, the quiet disapproval, the palpable disappointment from Arthur and Eleanor was a heavy sentence. Gavin, to his credit, was appalled by her actions. He insisted they begin couples counseling immediately and family therapy that included Jasper. He knew, as I did, that this wasn't just about a cheated exam. It was about a fundamental breakdown in their family's moral compass, driven by Serafina's toxic envy and ambition. The weeks that followed were strained. Family gatherings, when they happened at all, were subdued, awkward affairs. Serafina was a ghost of her former self, quiet, withdrawn, the life leached out of her. She'd attend if Gavin insisted, but she'd sit on the edge of the group, rarely speaking, her eyes downcast. One evening, Liam and I were sitting on our porch swing, watching the fireflies begin their nightly dance. Willow was asleep, the house quiet. I finally let out the breath I felt I'd been holding for weeks. "It just hurts so much, Liam." I whispered the words raw. To be targeted like that by family. To have my work, my passion twisted and used. Liam pulled me close, his arm a comforting weight around my shoulders. "I know, Lara. I know it does. But you handled this with more grace and strength than anyone could have asked for. You stood up for your values, for what's right. And in doing so, you didn't just protect your integrity, you protected Jasper too. You gave him a chance to learn to grow from this instead of letting him be crushed by his mother's ambition." His words were a lifeline. He understood. He always understood. Time, as it does, began to smooth the rawest edges of the betrayal. Months passed. The vibrant colors of autumn gave way to the stark quiet of winter, then the tentative blush of spring. Serafina remained subdued. She never apologized to me directly. I think the shame was too great, or perhaps the resentment still too deeply ingrained. But I saw a change in Jasper. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to take responsibility for his part. One afternoon, he came over to our house alone, looking nervous but determined. He apologized to me, a sincere, heartfelt apology that meant more than any grand gesture. He was working hard in his counseling sessions, he said, and trying to find his own way, not the one his mother had tried to force upon him. I saw a flicker of the good kid I knew he was, and I felt a sense of hope for him. With Serafina, I maintained a polite, if somewhat distant, civility. The warmth, the easy camaraderie we'd once shared, or I'd thought we'd shared, was gone, likely forever. But the anger had faded, replaced by a kind of weary understanding. Her actions came from a place of deep insecurity, a desperate need for validation that had warped into something ugly. My revenge, if you could even call it that, wasn't about causing her pain. It was about dragging the truth out into the harsh light of day, about reclaiming my peace and protecting the integrity of my world. A year or so later, on a crisp fall evening, I was in our kitchen stirring a large pot of vegetable soup. The aroma of simmering herbs and vegetables filled the air, a comforting, wholesome scent. Willow, now a budding teenager, wandered in, drawn by the smell. She leaned against the counter, watching me. "What you thinking about, Mom?" she asked, her voice laced with that new, almost adult curiosity. I smiled a genuine, unburdened smile. "Oh, just about how the seasons change," I said, ladling the rich, colorful soup into bowls. "And how good this soup smells." I handed her a bowl, and we sat at the kitchen table, the warmth seeping into our hands. There was a quiet peace in that moment, a peace that had been hard-won. Our family, the Vances, was different now, irrevocably changed. The illusion of perfection had been shattered, but in its place something more honest, more real, had begun to grow. Liam, Willow, and I, our little unit, had weathered the storm, our bonds stronger, our values reaffirmed. The perfect family Christmas card was a thing of the past, and honestly, I didn't miss it one bit. Because now I knew what was truly important, not the flawless facade, but the messy, complicated, and ultimately resilient truth of a family, finding its way back to solid ground, one honest bowl of soup at a time. My revenge was simple. I chose truth. I chose integrity. And in doing so, I chose peace. And that I've learned is the most satisfying victory of all. How do you find today's story? Leave a comment below if you like this video. Please like and share. Especially don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our interesting and exciting stories.